Across Somalia, a catastrophe is unfolding. The country is suffering an historic drought, with some regions barely seeing any rain for the last 2 years. Water is scarce, livestock are dying, crops not growing. And that has caused a severe food crisis for 7 million people, half the Somali population. Mahad Salad is a nomad whose family rely on their livestock for survival. But the drought has killed 150 of his goats and nearly all of his cattle.
marka saasas aad ogaanaysid marka dhibkaasaan qaba abaar xun baa lahaaya marka biib male aan baad male aan galey male marka loo saanay u dhamaatay hadee in la ogaadaan rabaa.
Drought is not uncommon in the Horn of Africa, but people here say this is the worst they have ever seen. Climate change is behind the unprecedented dry spell, but the war in Ukraine has dramatically affected grain supply. Political instability here in Somalia has played a role too. The government has failed to plan for or address this crisis, and now people are starving.
markii looday meesha sax kasta meesha isku dhinta aan taga hadee maxaan qabanaa hadee xanuun ma ay qabanaya xoolahaada oo saan noqday ee ilmihii oo ku sugaa farqi hayst oo waxa cunaaba u siilay intaan ka keenaa marka shaqo mahay kuwaas aan ku biilay kuwa waa dhamaaday.
Hospitals and clinics are overflowing with children suffering from severe malnutrition. Maqsid Hashim is 2 years old. She was born blind. Her family left their homes because of the drought, but Maqsid became ill at their temporary camp. The doctors examined her. They confirm she is malnourished. Usually both parents must consent for the child to be treated. But little Maqsid is in urgent need. She is quickly moved to the intensive care unit. Later, I went to check on her and speak to her mother.
Yeah.
The supervising doctor here in Kismayo told me they have seen a huge rise in malnourished children this year. With drastic food shortage, severe malnutrition spreads in waves through a population. Much like a virus, it affects the sick and vulnerable first. Many of the young children here are in a desperate condition. Jamal Osman has brought his 1-year-old son, Idris. He's been ill for over a month, while the family tried to feed him as best they could in a displacement camp on the edge of the city. His body temperature is dangerously low.
Almost half.
Almost half kg. ومقطعي وحولي المقصفية مرسمس oo ay weheliso hypothalamic shock shockan asal ahaan wuxuu ka yimid fuuqbax fuuqbaxaas wuxuu ka yimid shuban marka laf iyo maqaar waaye hilib dhan mara jirkiisa
inta badanna waa un IDP-ga waa gaajo waxaad wax keenaya
dadda dee rafaadsan inta badan degan IDP
waxba haysan
Idris' his family delayed bringing him to the hospital.
waqti ma ku saamix waay
waqtigana waa iska jira saamixi waay laakiin xogaa waxaan raadinayna daawo dhaqameed iyo
daawo dhaqameeda yaad la soo rafaaday
isdhehayna bal daawo dhaqameedkan markaad ku fiirisaan canuga maskaxda ku dhahday bal waxoogaa sheekh hebel
waa soo qostaad
waa soo daalnay
maskaxdan meesha dinsan hadda aymaa ku aragto asal ahaan waxay ka imaataa fuuqbax fuuqbaxan uma baahno in daawo dhaqameed la siiye wuxuu u baahan yahay in fuuqcayn loo sameeyo ama orals la siiyo ama faleembooyin la siiyo ya hadda cashirka kuu noqdaya
The UN has yet to officially declare this crisis a famine. Set measures of mortality and malnutrition have to be met before that can happen. But accurate statistics are almost impossible in Somalia, and while the UN delays, the children here are not getting the aid they need, and many are dying. Since January last year, around 1 million Somalis have become displaced because of the drought. Many of them end up in IDP camps like this. Around Kismayo, more than a dozen camps have been established in the last 6 months.
halkan waxaa lagu bilaabay dad 60 qoys markii koobaad lagu bilaabay haddana waa 1500 qoys halkan
Mohammed Sheikh is from the Ministry of Health. He leads a mobile team which visits the camps daily, trying to identify and help the most needy children.
يعني midka liita waa la qaadaya isbitaalka la geenaya midkana faqadarradu ku dhacdayna oo aan liidanin oo aan xanuuno kale iyo waxyaabo kale u helinina waa lagu daaweynaya wixii complication xanuun ka muuqdana waa laga daaweyn wixii kale waxaa la siinayaa biskudkii nafaqeynta la siin
6 years old Anfa Ahmed needs urgent attention. Like so many, the drought killed all her family's livestock. In desperate need of food, they had to walk for 6 days to get here.
عنك يعبر كذا وزاوي أهوسيا ده إيش يعبر كنا اسمه لهن وأنا جوه هذا حنوصل أو محل هاي وباهن دريال مركو حنقوس مننا سالكوا لقوا قاضي عنا للسين ما دام عنا عناس بسكت عناس وجدوا عنا للسين الدوان إفسارك القاضي ناسا سؤال تعمل كذا إفسارك إن أنقوا قاضي لقوا دريالا كده مكان صعف ما ده عنده وسعيده في بسكت إيه قاضينا
قبرين مغنى
يا سيك وعف ما ده كوا حرتنا جود هذا أوكي.
Even though her daughter is very ill, Anfa's mother is reluctant to go to the hospital because she's worried about leaving her other children.
واي في عندها
The health workers convince her by agreeing to make sure her other children are fed and looked after while she's away. Mother and daughter are put in an ambulance to take them to intensive care. On arrival, doctors say Anfa needs a blood transfusion. Mohammed Sheikh volunteers to donate.
waxaan dhiigayga ku caawinayaa oo la shubayaa gabadh yar oo naafo ah oo aan ka soo qaadnay ceel jaalle oo dhiig la'aan ahayd
Doctors are trying to stabilize her condition. No complications so far. She is responding well to the treatment. Mohammed checks on Anfa.
caafimaad yaa insha Allah may wada daaweyn dhiigana waa loo shubi wax shida iyo waxba toona insha Allah loo xiriirayso
It's been a week since I arrived at the hospital. I wanted to see some of the children I had met on the first day. Jamal Osman has responded well to treatment and is in a much better condition. He's gained weight. Maqsid Hashim is also recovering well from malnutrition, but she has problems with her heart and will be transferred to another ward. And I was later told that Anfa was discharged after spending 9 days in hospital. For every child that survives, there are hundreds who won't. The word famine evokes emotions and usually triggers an outpouring of empathy in the form of aid. That can save lives, but the technical definition of famine is disputed. And while international bodies and Somali politicians debate, the people here suffer and wait.
Well, joining me now is the Deputy Director for the World Food Programme in Somalia, Bemanke Sanko. Thank you for joining us. We've just seen some very distressing images from Somalia, but put this in some scale for us in terms of how bad this is.
I'm afraid we've only seen one health center in Kismayo, but the situation in Somalia is similar across the country, and there are more areas that are even more worrisome. The food security situation and malnutrition in Somalia is very, very serious. We are faced with unprecedented number of people who are acutely malnourished, and it's heartbreaking. Somalia is facing insecurity, high food prices, COVID, and now drought. 4 consecutive fall rains have left over 7.1 million Somalis hungry, and they need food assistance to put food on the table for their families. That is almost half of the population of Somalia. Their livestock has been wiped out completely as a result of the drought, and many more died.
Well, at what point are you going to declare a famine? At what point do we say what this is? Because perhaps that will make a difference to the world stepping up with donations.
Currently, there is no declaration of drought in Somalia, but the experts are actually looking at the new data that's available. And we as the United Nations and also World Food Programme are watching and following up to see what advice will come out of that. But however, as we wait and watch, we have been responding, we have been scaling up our activities in Somalia. World Food Programme alone, in April, we reached about 1.7 million Somalis. And as of June, we've reached over 4 million Somalis with life-saving food assistance and also malnutrition treatment.
Yeah, but what can you explain why this is not being called a famine?
The word famine, it's more of a technical term, which basically is based on some threshold. What is important for us right now is for us to have the resources that is required, for us to pull all the resources together, for donors to come in so that we can respond to the needs of the people in Somalia. We all know that Somalia has been affected by fall field rains. Since October, the United Nations, including World Food Programme, has been raising warnings that there is a deterioration in terms of food security in Somalia. And in April of 2022, we did warn of the risks of famine, but we haven't got the adequate resources to actually respond at scale.
Now, thousands of people...
If the resources is available, we will be able to respond at scale.
Thousands of people have already died, it's believed, in the Horn of Africa from malnutrition. In 2011, around 250,000 people lost their lives. Do you believe this one is going to be worse?
We believe that we've learned a lot of lessons since 2011 and 2016 and 2017. And we have all the mechanisms in place to actually respond. We have built capacity for governments. We have built capacity with NGOs to actually respond to this sort of situation in this area. What is holding us is the resources that is required. Unfortunately, the drought in these areas is actually unprecedented. And we do require the resources to really respond at scale. And it's not just about one sector responding, but we need an integrated response to ensure that we save lives. We are in the race against time now.
Thank you. I'm sorry to talk across you. There's clearly a delay on the line, but thank you very much indeed for joining us, Bemanke Sanko. Well, the US ambassador to Somali, Larry Andre, joins me now from the capital, Mogadishu. Ambassador, thank you for joining us. The United States has pledged a lot of money. The rest of the world doesn't seem to have stepped up.
Well, let me start by complimenting the report I watched this documentary with my USAID colleague, Catherine Lauer, who has spent 40 years serving populations such as this humanitarian crisis, such as the one that we just witnessed in this terrible report that so well represents the human tragedy that is unfolding right now in Somalia. She and I both agree that what you've shown is an accurate representation of the human tragedy brought on by this unprecedented drought. We see no record of this in Somalia's history, a drought this severe and this long. So please know that the United States and some of Somalia's other international partners have not waited for a famine declaration. Delivery of urgently needed aid has been ongoing for months. With coordination and expertise from United Nations agencies, including the World Food Program. I want to associate myself with the remarks by my friend Manke Sanko, and robust response from Somalia's federal and state governments. Delivery of aid is ongoing. You accurately say that we need more response. The American people, mainly through USAID, have funded 70% of the contributions received so far by the UN Humanitarian Response Plan. 70%.
Yeah, indeed, I mean, it's been a lot of money that the United States has pledged, but as I say, the rest of the world doesn't seem to be stepping up. You know, do you think the world's priorities need to be recalibrated? You know, when you look at 20% of the world's aid right now is going to Ukraine, and there are people about to starve to death in the Horn of Africa.
We have appealed to Somalia's other donors to step up, and we see some positive signs in that direction. And to do as we do, to coordinate that aid through the United Nations agencies to make sure that it gets to those in greatest need. As was pointed out in the report, Russia's war against Ukraine has caused a great disruption in the world grain market and has greatly increased the cost of grain to Somalis and greatly decreased the supply. But yes, we appeal to Somalia's other friends to step up with the needed aid to this dire humanitarian emergency, and to coordinate it through the United Nations agencies like we do, so it gets to those in greatest need.
How do you think the early warning system can be made more effective, though? I mean, people have been warning of impending death, of impending famine in the Horn of Africa for months now, yet we're almost there, and it's going to be too late. By the time that's declared, it's too late for the people there.
Yeah, the drought is reaching catastrophic proportions. And with the early warning systems in place, our government started ramping up its response for some months now. And it's not that we've pledged this amount, we are delivering the aid, again, through United Nations agencies and other means to make sure it gets to those in greatest need. So it's more than just a pledge, it's actually happening. We note on the United Nations side an effort underway right now to greatly scale up. So the United Nations has been involved throughout, but now is greatly scaling up its efforts in response to this accelerating human tragedy. We get rainy seasons normally twice a year in Somalia. And each one that we have a very underperforming rainy season, there is the hope that the next one will be a good one, because in the past that has been the pattern. Now we are seeing successive rainy seasons greatly underperform, and that is what is causing this human tragedy.